iTunes U at Kennesaw State University.
Welcome everyone. We'll start right away so we can give our speaker the most time as possible. I think he has a lot to share with us. My name is Dan Faraka. I'm Director of Education at UR and the co-coordinator of the Year of Peru. Here comes my better half, Dr. Silva, the other coordinator for the Year of Peru. Our speaker today, I think he's one of the people coming most recently from Peru to talk to us. He's just back like a week or two, and I think from doing archaeological work in Peru. His name is Vranich. He received his PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, and is currently a research associate at the Cotsen Institute of Archaeology at UCLA. He has received multiple grants from the National Science Foundation and other agencies to conduct field work at the major Bolivian site of Tiwanaku, and is also conducting research in Peru. He has a special interest in developing innovative approaches for the use of digital media in archaeology, and I know he has a lot of slides. Without further ado, we're going to join me in welcoming Professor Vranich.
Thank you. Okay, that's the slides there. Thank you. Just arrow right there. How many of you are required to be here? All right, I'm sort of wondering. This is a lot of people to come and listen to talk to me. I appreciate your attention. One of the things I do like to give public talks. It keeps you honest. Because when you speak too much to your own colleagues, you develop your own jargon, and then soon actually nobody understands or cares what you're trying to say. So I try to give public talks, and one of the things I do, I didn't mention to Dan, is that I go on cruise ships, and I talk about archaeology. And that allows me to continue interacting with the public, a much older public in that case, far, far older. So it's nice to see young people around here. One of the last cruises, I went in and there was just like 4 people sitting up front. I thought, oh good, these are the eager ones that want to learn about archaeology. And they go, what are you going to talk about today? They were in their early 130s or something. And I said, well, I'm going to talk about this excavation I did. We found the sacrifice. These children were hacked apart, probably ripped open, the whole works. And they're like, oh, what parish are you from? And I'm like, no, that was Mass. That was an hour ago. We just crossed the timeline, so you missed Mass. I'm sorry, that's not going to be that. And the poor people thought I was going to actually give a Mass about human sacrifice. So they got up and they left. Then I gave a talk to, my usual talk to a fun group of people, and several of them stayed awake through the entire thing. It was quite good. So here we are, Peru. Who has been to Peru here? All right. Who feels they will never go to Peru? Really? Wow. I think actually Peru is a very accessible place. You will go there, and one of the reasons I'm going to be giving this talk is sort of inform those that are going, and I imagine a lot are going to go in your lifetime, exactly what is going on there once you arrive into Peru, sort of to orient you a little bit as to this amazing, amazing country and its amazing culture. And the other thing is I'd like to touch upon some of the topics of this incredible Year of Peru lecture series and symposium and cooking and everything that you have, and talk a little bit about Peru as a country that is far more complex than just a single culture of the Inca. And I'd also like to talk about how archaeology actually relates to the present, or it fits into politics, nationalism, and sort of the modern world. A lot of folks think that archaeology is just people sort of hiding in their offices, writing things up, or adventuring around the world. And actually, as an archaeologist, and the more time you spend in a country, the more this becomes true. And my colleague Terry can probably confirm this. You become more of a politician after a while, or administrator, and the amount of time you spend excavating becomes less and less. So here at Peru, the Incas, obviously this is a while ago. In 3 days you could get there with Pan Am. I think you can get there a lot quicker. Everyone, by the time you get down to Peru, you have seen thousands of pictures of Machu Picchu, an incredible place to visit, of course. What else? What else are you bringing with you when you go to Peru? Well, there's Indiana Jones. He goes down to Peru at one point. They get a couple of things wrong, like everything. There's also, you know, some of the younger generation, when I talk about Cusco, they start thinking about the Disney show. What else? We have a lot of panpipe music, to the point that South Park sent the kids down there to destroy the country of Peru so that people wouldn't have to listen to panpipe music anymore. I do have a little bit to talk about panpipe music, and the indigenous music is very different from what we often hear when we're walking around Pottery Barn or whatever, and there's a Peruvian band there, and they're actually franchised out through Europe, combining all types of strange indigenous garb, playing Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel on the panpipe. So when the South Park kids came out with tapas and moonscapes, I greatly appreciated that episode. The Simpsons, also. They went down to Machu Picchu, and for those, that was last season, but for those of you that follow The Simpsons, that's the second time Homer has been to Machu Picchu. Once he just went with Barney. This time he actually took the family down there. But when a place becomes iconic to the point that it can be represented in a cartoon, you know that that point is pretty well known. Now, when you arrive in Peru and you get up to Cusco, you're going to be assaulted in all different directions by images, by things to buy, by sculptures, by paintings, and so on. And it becomes very difficult after a while to understand exactly what is authentic, what isn't, what is truly part of the culture, and what are recent inventions, and what does it actually mean? There's a lot of chess sets being sold down there. They have Incas versus Spanish, which I think is sort of odd, because it resulted in sort of a genocide, but they put it into a funny game form. But here you are, plenty of things. You can get your high-quality alpaca, get your sweater down there. Nobody in my family, they specifically requested me, do not bring anything made of alpaca home. We have enough already. The first few years, I brought them hats, I brought them mittens. I've completely run out of alpaca things. There's, these little cute things, and people like to get these little fuzzy alpaca things. And here's, I guess you can call it in sort of somewhat indigenous-looking backpacks and all, made in China. They are. I'm absolutely serious. Made in China, imported to Peru, then exported over to Bolivia. So it's becoming quite globalized. Erotic pottery, fake erotic pottery from the, maybe I should change that, keep that out there. Fake erotic pottery based on a culture from the coast 700 years before the Inca, including this type of jewelry, also from the coast of Peru. So why in the world would you go to the heartland of the Inca Empire to buy pottery? And first of all, I've never met anyone who has purchased something like this. I don't know what type of gift this would make to somebody. Here you go. So here you are purchasing something from 1,000 miles away from 700 years beforehand in one area. So cultures are being combined here. Inca Cola, owned by Coca-Cola. Has anyone tried this? What do you think? I have never heard that before. It tastes to me like boiled lollipops. Here's Inca Cola. The Cusqueño beer. The 12-sided stone in Cusco is a famous piece of Inca architecture. So the beer has a little 12-sided stones on it. Sometimes we say, let's go do research, and we just go get the beer, and we look at the stone on it. So that's sort of our little keyword to escape the field school sometimes. Sometimes I have the oddest phrasings. The magic is in its mystical origin. I have no idea what that means. But this is one of these glorious Peruvian festivals where you have knockoff costume guys like fake Barneys, fake mice, children, teenage girls in small skirts dancing around. Then you have families with kids enjoying it. Mom and dad are drunk. It's just a wonderful time where basically there's no age segregation going on when it comes to a festival. Now, if you arrive for the Inti Raymi, this is the Festival of the Sun, and this is the festival that occurred during the Inca Empire, where the Inca would do a variety of things, including calling the sun back, starting the agricultural cycle, and you can go and see this. Now this festival dates back all the way to 1944. This modern festival. So you can watch people run around with sort of plastic swords and paper mache hats. They go up to the site of Sacsayhuaman, and they're carrying this guy. He won the Who Looks More Like an Inca Emperor contest, so he gets to be the Inca Emperor that year. And in the meantime, you have tourists sitting along the sides. They're paying about $150 to have witness to this. Meanwhile, the Cusqueños are sort of up here in the cheap seats. And last year, they actually at one point just rushed the stands and actually overwhelmed the place. And that was fantastic. So what exactly is this festival? Are you seeing something that's authentic or not? And that's something that you also have to decide when you arrive. Is this a recreation, or is this really somebody similar to what you see when you go to Atlanta Airport with the Zimbabwe sculptures? Is this somebody actually going back, a group of people going back and reconnecting with their culture, or is this a modern invention, or is this a globalization, or is this simply a marketing ploy? And this is something that you have to think about also when you're traveling around Peru. Here we go, Machu Picchu. It is one site of thousands upon thousands in Peru, and there's a lot of other amazing places. Up here, it's absolutely magical. And when we've done our work down there with the field school students, we actually worked here at night. So when everyone would leave, we would go in there with the equipment, sit back, and just enjoy things. And I timed it so it was during the full moon period. Absolutely wonderful. Down below, it's an absolute disaster of this town called Aguascalientes. And it is probably my least favorite place on earth. But this is where between 1,500 to 2,500 tourists arrive a day. Everybody on their bucket list, I'm going to see Machu Picchu, I'm going to have this amazing spiritual experience and so on. They charge up there, hang out for 2 hours, come back down, buy some Chinese-made Peruvian bags, and then go back home. And everyone takes more or less the same picture. Peru has tried very hard to diversify what it's marketing as a part of its culture. They say, stay in Lima. It's a city of museums. There's the Museum of Gold, which up until recently, I'd calculate about 80 to 90% of the objects there were fake, manufactured recently. But if you do go to the Larco Museum, which is probably one of the nicest museums, I think, in all of South America. A little bit more up the coast, you have Corral. The American government gave about $1 million to have this excavation, to have this developed. The Peruvians have also put in a lot of effort. If you go even further up the coast, you have the Moche culture, from that erotic pottery and that all those other, and from that jewelry. These are excavations done by a UCLA professor along with Walter Alva, and this is an amazing, amazing part of Peru with excellent food, I might add. And this is also being heavily touted, including a new $1 million museum from the government of Germany, saying there's a lot to do in Peru, and everyone believed that you can go there and do a lot until the big floods took out the railway going to Machu Picchu. Now, when that happened, it was down for several months. And as a result, they calculated Peru lost about $800 million. Tourism is number 3 when it comes to income for Peru. And during that period, Cusco was absolutely deserted. Ladies with their llamas waiting for nobody to take their pictures. There's that one guy, and he stands by the 12-sided stone going, come take a picture with the last Inca. And he had nobody to play with either. Absolutely, the tourism collapsed. So you look at Peru, as much as they're trying to diversify this, they still are focused on one culture and, in fact, one site. There's so much more to Peru, but they're trying to see what exactly do you do. Now, from the talk that you heard from Julio Ortega about the moment of encounter between Pizarro and Atahualpa, now this has been replicated thousands of times over in artist renditions of this. Here's a very modern version of the initial assault on the Inca. Here's another one over here. Now this image has gotten so popular, the idea of the meeting of the old world and the new world, that even on this book of Guns, Germs, and Steel, a very popular book, very well written book, on the cover is Pizarro grabbing at Atahualpa, signifying tragedy, a past tragedy, and perhaps a future tragedy that we may replicate again if we don't take care of certain things. So Peru, on some levels, is it Inca? Some people think so. Is it Machu Picchu? Is Peru an encounter? a moment of encounter, and this happens a lot, especially in the age of global tourism, where a country or an entire place gets reduced down to one moment in time and gets marketed. When I went to go visit my friends in Warsaw, and Warsaw was completely destroyed during the war, it was rebuilt in an amazing fashion, and I was quite interested walking around. He was very bored, not only because he had done this several times, but he says, well, here we go, another example of our glorious past. Here's another monument to our glorious defeat, and so on. He was sort of resentful that his city, where he's lived, a city with a lot of history, had been reduced down to one moment, and everyone is going there for one particular reason. Same thing with Vietnam. You go there and they say, Vietnam is not a war, it's a country. Even though you can go there and for $1, you can shoot off per round, shooting off an M16, go crawl through the Viet Cong tunnels, which have been widened to American frame style. But again, this is a country with a long history that has been reduced down for the purpose of global marketing to one moment in time. And that's what I'm going to try to do here, is expand a little bit and explain a little bit more about Peru. Here's the indigenous flag. Do not tell them that it also is used for other purposes. But some of the students that do arrive that haven't done the reading are a little bit confused. This is the plaza in Cusco, my favorite plaza in the world. Now, you did hear Jessica Stevenson gave a talk about the Inca and their mythic history. And a very interesting talk, and she referred a lot to what the Inca did to establish themselves as an empire. Now, they believe themselves, this is a representation of Cusco, that Cusco was the center of the world. Before them, there was nothing. There was darkness. They arrived. They brought all the trappings of civilization, and that gave them the right to conquer, because they had been placed there by the god or by the gods to bring civilization to the barbarians. And one place that they lay claim to was Lake Titicaca. And here's the Inca road leading down to Lake Titicaca and to the sanctuary of Copacabana, the best place to look over the lake. And they said this is where the Inca was born. By laying claim to Lake Titicaca, they laid claim to all the water in the Andes, because it was thought that the water circulated through Lake Titicaca to the ocean and back around. They said, this is ours. All those springs, all those wells that you people use, where you say your ancestors have come from, they all originate here. This was fine, the idea. I don't think anyone else really believed them, but they had this propaganda machine, which ran into its first major problem when they crossed the lake over to this site called Tiwanaku. Now, Jessica mentioned it a little bit about the imagery of Tiwanaku, but the Inca said they were the first. They were the firstborn. Nothing before them existed. Now, they get to Tiwanaku, and there's something there that is clearly way before them. So what they do, in sort of a little revision of mythic history that would probably make Fox News proud, is that they decided, it's like, no, this is where the first Inca was born. And what we see right here are the remains of that initial civilization that was destroyed by the god that became angry at the previous inhabitants, and he turned them to stone. So the Inca said, come to Tiwanaku, and they actually built several palaces there, other things. Says, come to Tiwanaku, and you can see evidence that the Inca were the firstborn. This is where we were born, and you can see what happened to the bad people that didn't follow the Viracocha's orders, the Lord God orders, and didn't accomplish the things that we did. They became stone. They were turned to stone. The stonework, the famous stonework of Cusco is said to have been copied from Tiwanaku itself. In the legend, the Emperor Pachacutec brings Tiwanaku stonemasons back to Cusco to build Machu Picchu, to build Cusco, and so on. Analysis of the stone says it doesn't look like it's a direct translation of technology, but it looks like they replicated the look just by trying to imitate it. And they imitated other things, such as the Andean cross, which I see you're wearing over there on your jacket. This is one of the symbols that was copied, and this happens all the time. If you go to Washington, D.C., clearly that's not Rome. Romans didn't build it, but we're using a lot of Roman motifs. Every civilization goes back to another moment and copies something else, and then reinterprets it, and uses it as part of their justification. the Inca himself, he said, well, here's the imagery at Tiwanaku. There's this, what we call the sun god or the Viracocha god or the staff figure. The Inca said, well, actually, that's me. That's actually me. And you can see this is how the Inca was represented, standing on something similar to this sun god, a little step platform standing on top. So they took something which was potentially a liability, the fact that something existed before them, and turned it into part of their propaganda, saying, actually, this was part of us. We're a lot older than you think. Now, when the Spanish arrived, the Inca told them these stories, and they, of course, no, this is all false, and so on. They laughed at them, and as the Inca realized that they had to adapt to a new environment, to a new religion, to new politics, they began to change it. They said, actually, we always knew about Christianity. The Viracocha became a little bit more like a traveling apostle over here on the left, and over there on the right, they say Tiwanaku. They still insisted that they had built Tiwanaku. They say the Inca built Tiwanaku after and copied from the plan of Jerusalem. So this was an attempt, and a very brave and very intelligent attempt, to try to survive what was a traumatic encounter with the Spanish in the European world. Now I'm going to talk about Tiwanaku. I'm jumping over the border into Bolivia. Culturally, geographically, this is the same area as where Cusco is, the area where the Inca developed, grew up from their empire. Right now it's divided by the frontier between Peru and Bolivia, just about a few kilometers in. So we're at the southern part of Lake Titicaca in the modern Republic of Bolivia. If you have your opportunity, when you do go down there, do go see Lake Titicaca. It is sort of like Lake Tahoe, but a lot higher, a lot colder. We're at 13,000 feet above sea level. I'm generally down there during the winter time. It is cold, extremely cold. And I've gone sailing across this lake. And they say, now, don't worry about swimming or if the boat capsizes, because you have about 7 seconds before you freeze. And we've tried to go in the water, and it is amazing how cold it is. This is being recorded, so I'm not cursing at all. Here's another shot of the lake. You see Totora in the front, a very important grass that grows. In the back, those are pens for fish. And some of the best sushi I have had in my life has been from Lake Titicaca, from the lake trout. So I do highly recommend having that. Here's some of the boats that go by. This was up until recently, actually. I mean, up until a few decades ago, the boats were made out of Totora reeds. So people would get the reeds, bundle them up together, and create these rafts. And this is one of the few remaining guys. We actually worked with them to recreate some of the Totora reeds, and in one instance actually made for television a giant replica boat that was about 50 feet long, to see, could we actually create something as large in the past that could have transported stone from one side of the lake to the other to build the city of Tiwanaku. For those that are meeting with me this afternoon or so on, I can show you slides of that wonderful way to spend a summer, which is bundling up reeds for 3 months. Nevertheless, we learned a lot about what it's like to actually try to replicate ancient technology. Here they are in the modern boats. You think fishermen are just like, they're just going to go and fish, get stuff, and come back. They actually choose their sails from different colors. They enjoyed the fact that in the morning when they all go out, it looks sort of like a textile going out across the lake. It's very beautiful. And here's another shot of a full moon going over one of the mountains. It is a magical place in the fact that it seems like the mountains are actually coming out of the lake as you sail across it. Highly recommend doing this trip if you can. Along the shore, it's very fertile. It's a microclimate, so while it's cold everywhere else, there's a little bit warmer along here, and you can actually grow some very good crops. And as the lake recedes, you see these boundary stones, these rows of stones going into the water. Every bit of ground underneath the lake is actually owned by somebody. And they know when the lake recedes, that's going to be some good planting right there. So they already have that marked off from the last time that the lake was actually a little bit lower. Further in, about 10 kilometers, we hit this place called the Altiplano. And the best way to describe it is brown. It is very brown. Brown, here it is. I really thought that growing up in Philadelphia, I had a very good and strong definition of nothing to do really means. But once you're in the Altiplano, and it's just grass in all directions, then I really knew what nothing to do really, really means in this location. And this is a place where, yeah, there's grass, lots of grass, and we're constantly getting sick when we're up there too, because of new parasites or new things in the food or something or other. There isn't a tree or anything to hide around, so quickly you lose all modesty after working up there for a while. Llama, this is my favorite domestic animal. I tell people you really can't own a llama. You sort of have a relationship with a llama. And it's not a good relationship. It's sort of like towards the end, let's just sit on the couch, be quiet, watch a movie type relationship. Because they have a mind of their own, and they spit, and they're very, very accurate. Very accurate. I was walking to work one day, and then an hour later, I'm back. And they're like, "What's wrong, Alexi?" Because I got spit on by a llama. I'm going to go lie down for a while, which is the first time I've ever used that excuse for not showing up to work. But he actually got me around the glasses. I do like them. Here's llama. And here's what it looks like up at Tiwanaku. Now, this is my summer times, and that's why I tolerate those cruises, and I go off to Caribbean or Lord knows where. Just to me, it's a bunch of Benetton's and Gap stores around the Caribbean, it seems, because I miss out completely on my summer. This is what it looks like when I wake up in the morning. That is my morning commute. Traffic. Coming from Los Angeles and also Atlanta, you probably understand how difficult traffic can be. This is my traffic. The worst that happens is you get spit on and you go home and lie down for a while if it hits you in the eye. But what was found up here was this place called Tiwanaku. And back when the first explorers, after independence from Spain, and opened up to outsiders, they called it the Baalbek of the New World, or the Stonehenge of the New World, because it had these tremendous, tremendous stones in what seemed to be the middle of absolutely nowhere. And people are wondering, why exactly was this here? And here's one of these strange statues that didn't have any resemblance to anything else in Peru or in Bolivia. This is a shot, a little aerial shot, and I'm going to be mentioning several of these things. So just bear with me. These are Aymara names, not even Quechua, Aymara names for monuments. This is the Kalasasaya, which means standing stone, standing stone. Over to your left, that little square, is the semi-subterranean temple. Over to the right, up to the top, is the remains of a pyramid, or a large pyramid platform. That's called the Akapana. Now, Tiwanaku spreads out across a lot of the Pampa, but this is the primary central area we'll concentrate on as I discuss some of the ideas. This is what Ephraim Squire, he went down to negotiate the vicious dispute, if not battle, going on over the Guano Islands at the time. Very important source of fertilizers. He went down there from the State Department, solved that no problem, went around Peru and Bolivia recording all of these ruins. Very interesting read. I recommend it, not only for good travel writing, but the man was going insane. Eventually he was institutionalized when he got back to New York, but as he's going and he's there longer period of time, you can see he's sort of getting a little bit stranger and stranger and getting into more conflict with people. But he arrived at Tiwanaku. Imagine traveling for weeks, and he got to the gateway of the sun, where that sun god was that the Inca copied, and this is the drawing that he made. So everyone thought, wow, this is fantastic, this is huge. This is actually the image used by the Society for American Archaeology, well, this monument, not this image in particular, as their symbol for the Society for American Archaeology. So it's a very important piece of architecture. Here's a close-up of the sun god that's in the middle. The nose has been blown off by the Bolivian military about 100 years ago, and they're using it for target practice. So unfortunately, some of these things definitely have been damaged. And this is what the gateway actually looks like. Everyone who goes there goes, I really thought it was larger. And when you're in Bolivia, you see Gateway the Sun restaurant, Gateway the Sun bar, Gateway the Sun laundromat, and so on. So you finally get to see the Gateway the Sun. You stand there, you go, this is tiny. And actually, it is a very amazing piece of architecture, but you've had so much expectation built over it that you just sort of look at it. It looks sort of small. I guess, and I hope no one's from Texas, it's sort of like when you visit the Alamo. You go, this is it? Actually, it was a lot larger at the time. But when something achieves iconic status, you're almost bound to disappoint when you actually see it. So what do? You grab children, and you make them sit. and then you take the picture. It looks a lot bigger if you have a child. Here you go, put them on the, no, you sit down, you kneel, that way it looks a lot better. Or of course, llamas, llamas, llamas. Llamas are always good. My friends are going, why are you people always taking pictures of llamas every time you're down here? And I'm like, these are amazing animals and so on. Then when he came to visit me in New York, he's like, you're not going to believe what I saw in Washington. And he's showing me pictures of squirrels. He's like, look at this squirrel, look at that squirrel, look at that squirrel. It's like, did you take pictures of anything other than squirrels? Apparently, he had never seen a squirrel before. They're not down there in the highlands. He thought they were amazing, these things running around. So I told him, all right, I'll take pictures of llamas, you do pictures of squirrels, and we'll just let it be at that point. There's a shot of the semi-subterranean temple. It has a couple of pieces of sculpture in here. Here's one. You can see that this guy has his hands like this. They're talking about it, he's dead or something. We call it the "God damn it's cold up here" sculpture. We sort of stand there and we're like looking at it. But along the sides you can see these little projections, these little heads. Here you go. There's about 175 of them. And you can see them all going all the way around there. They're all different. But the one I hate the most, and you wouldn't really think that I would actually hate a piece of sculpture, is this guy right here. Tiwanaku, Bolivia, one of the 10 most mysterious places on Earth. I'm going to get into this now. I'm doing work in Bolivia. I'm trying to do research. You figure research is just simply science. You go down there and so on. Let me talk a bit, just from my personal experience, of what are the elements, what are the variables that go into actually excavating and doing research in a country such as Bolivia and in Peru, where this is considered to be a national monument. Imagine doing work on restoring or excavating Washington, D.C. The amount of politics that would be involved in doing that. Here you have a lot of stakeholders. A lot of people that are going to come by that aren't archaeologists, who are very interested in the site. And the question, in addition to showing how much nationalism politics plays in archaeology, the question is, what exactly is the role of the archaeologist? If people arriving here have seen Indiana Jones, if they've seen South Park, if they've seen pictures of Machu Picchu, all those ancient alien things on TV all the time, what exactly is my role in trying to influence or change people's mind or educate them in some way? Here we have, it's one of the 10 most mysterious spots. Here we go. It is on Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. The scene, who's seen the movie? Okay, the scene where he's knocking off statue heads and letting the, okay, he's knocking off these things. So it's actually, they do a little replica of the semi-subterranean temple. So this again is here, and every once in a while I'll see a tour group come, and they'll just make a beeline for this little guy right here, and they'll start talking, and now that's one of those weirdo alien tour groups. And they start looking around because invariably the guy is saying, but archaeologists don't want us to know the truth. And they sort of look around, at which point I point to one of the graduate students. I go, that's the director right there. He's hiding the truth. So they go and they talk to him while I go and escape and do something else. Of course, I have Von Daniken, Graham Hancock. These are people that have written about Tiwanaku as an alien landing pad. Graham Hancock was actually there when I was there, and a lot of things were discussed. When he published the book, he just took me out. There were 5 people standing talking to him. By the time it got published, I was eliminated. There's only 4. So he took me out of the book completely. These guys are here. 7 million copies sold for that one. It's just absolutely incredible. This is the current that as archaeologists you're trying to not fight against, but or at least recognize and see, how does my research fit into this? Then, when that goes by, this other guy, Jim Allen, he decided that Atlantis was in Bolivia, so we had another cycle of people coming down here looking for Atlantis, talking to me. This one guy, he got over $1 million. I'm working with a $12,000 budget for 20 people. We are sharing a potato for lunch. These people come down with $1 million. They're doing things. We're going to go look here and here. And when I'm talking to this guy, when I mean talking, I mean yelling. And I'm like, and he's like, no, I came down here and I want to be completely objective. I don't want to be biased. I go, that's another way of saying you're ignorant of everything that's ever happened here. Are you going to read anything that's been done? He says, no, I'm going to see for myself. So apparently being completely ignorant of a place is a good quality. And you don't see this in any other field. You don't go into the doctor's office. The guy's like, I have not taken a drop of medicine. I'm going to operate on you because I don't want to be influenced by other ideas of how you should go about performing open heart surgery. So this guy was here. He ran around Bolivia, spent $1 million, decided, no, Atlantis is not here. Went back home, and he was gone for a while. Then dinosaurs. What else do I got? So I got aliens, I got dinosaurs. Here's an Inca riding a dinosaur. So this is a constant source of amusement, if not frustration, when I'm there. Now this is what Tiwanaku looks like on any other day. Occasionally somebody looking for Atlantis, a couple of school children or so on. Then, there's my co-director. That's what it looks like on the morning of June 21st, which is the summer solstice. So there's people all over the world celebrating it. Here, all the people that could not get into Machu Picchu, they're here at Tiwanaku. They've come here to see something absolutely amazing. They've come to feel this mythical power, this mystic energy. And I will tell you, I'm absolutely confident that at 6 in the morning, at 13,000 feet in wintertime, in the coldest day of the year, I am not feeling none of this energy at all. That's actually a battery-operated jacket, and I'm still absolutely miserable. Standing here, I have to talk to different people, and then, the moment when the sun actually comes out, people start to fight. People are getting excited. And there it is. It does not go through the gateway. It never went through the gateway. Everybody that comes here that says, we're going to see the sun come through the gateway, it doesn't come through at all. It never did. And then somebody yelled, the archaeologists moved the gate. And then all of a sudden, it's my fault. Now, not only did I have hippies before, now I have angry hippies chasing me around the site. And then none of this is my fault. So every year, they're like, okay, well, why do we stand out here for a while? This guy over here, he just got so much mythical energy, he just passed out. Everyone's drinking a lot to try to stay warm. So it's planned in great Bolivian fashion. There's 15,000 people. Everyone's drinking. There's one bathroom. And this is my archaeological site. I have to excavate across this. I let a few days go before it completely dries out. So there they are. All right, come back. See the sun go down through the gateway. See it come up through the gateway of the sun. That's a completely different one. No, it'll come to the left of the gateway of the sun. All right, next year, okay, it didn't work. Come see the moon come through the gateway of the sun. And this is actually a photoshopped image. It says Bolivia, the authentic still exists. And here's a completely made-up image of the moon coming up through the gateway. And then the papers cover it every year. And it's sort of interesting. Here it says one paper, same day, solstice attracts more tourists. The other paper, New Year, it's a little bit more, let's say, more devotion because there were less tourists. Nobody actually knows how many people show up, but it is a huge money-making enterprise for the valley. Maybe 15,000 people are there, $40 each. That gets divided among the 26 different communities. This is a major source of cash flow into this area. And these are people just sitting around on my archaeological site, falling off walls, drinking, passing out, urinating all over the place. I really, really hate this festival, and I have to deal with it every year. And eventually they leave. And this is sort of the happy part of the day. And the interesting part is when the sun starts to go down. It throws these tremendously long shadows across the site, and then the sun goes through the gateway. At dawn. I mean dawn, no, sunset. There, dusk, there we go. It actually goes through that, and it shoots out a beam of light. Absolutely amazing. Now, where that goes, I'll come back to that in a moment. Let me get on to a little bit more about the idea of what is Tiwanaku nationalism and so on. This is Carlos Ponce Sanguines. This is when he was young and mean, and here's when he's old and mean. He was a very interesting figure. I knew him well, and I would go to his house and talk about his excavations, and he would talk to me for about 6 hours straight without taking a breath about every idea and every thought that's ever come to him. He was quite the forward thinker in that he wanted to create for this new Republic of Bolivia a common identity. You want to say we are all Bolivian, from the tropics to the highlands and so on. We are all part of one country, even though the country was falling apart after having lost another war, in the War of the Chaco. And when he started excavating, people were completely armed. at Tiwanaku. He had to carry around a gun. He set up a machine gun on top of the pyramid, and they would shoot back and forth. Those were the early days of archaeology. And what he wanted to do was create something in the image of Teotihuacan, because he'd been there. He'd been to Machu Picchu. He goes, all these countries have these powerful sites, these monumental sites that really resonate well with the local population. They become a source of pride. But this is what I have. I have grass. In the background, that's actually a pyramid. But on top, it's hollow. It's not because it was constructed that way. That's a looter's pit. The Spanish actually dug out the interior of this pyramid looking for gold, and they didn't find anything, but they managed to destroy it. And meanwhile, all that fine stonework that covered the pyramid and the other buildings was cannibalized or reused to build churches. So by the time you actually get to looking at Tiwanaku, it is a fiercely underwhelming sight. You've just come from looking at the sites in Peru. You're carrying with you what we call temple fatigue. You just can't see one more ruin. Everything sort of looks the same. And I've taken tour groups around. People are cranky. I just sort of take them shopping at this point. They're like, why do we have to go see one more ruin? And this is what Carlos Ponce de Sanguinés was dealing with. He goes, we need something like Machu Picchu. And he enacted one of the largest excavations to ever occur in South America. Not only is a whole bunch of people excavating, but look in the back. There's a whole truck full of guys here. And he was going to excavate this or liberate the monuments of all this dirt. Here's a shot of what part of Tiwanaku looked like. Those pillars in the background, they'll become important a little bit later on. And that's how he decided to finish it up. He goes, no, we'll make the wall a little bit more a little bit nicer, and we'll finish it up. It actually earned Sanguinés the recognition in Tiwanaku of the worst reconstructed site in the Americas. And he spent the rest of his time sort of defending himself from that, and he took all of the notes, all the photographs, and hid them. So even though this place was completely excavated in certain parts, nobody knows exactly what was found there. The result, though, was spectacular. He did create an actual national identity based around a prehistoric site. Here's one group or another visiting one of my excavations. Children. Every day there's thousands of children. Big stones are interesting for children for a while. Gringos excavating, now that's interesting. And they'll just sit there and for hours look at me and make up all types of songs with words that rhyme with gringo and so on. They have just a fabulous time. So they'll forget all the stones that they've seen. They will remember the white guy covered in dirt laying on the ground excavating. So they're there. Every time there's a new president in Bolivia, which is often, actually, I think they have 187 changes of government since independence, they always have a ceremony at Tiwanaku as a way of, recognizing the indigenous identity, recognizing the Aymara Indian, who are a very powerful voting bloc, and potatoes. Every time we do this, we have potatoes. You guys who's tried the food in the cafeteria for the Year of Peru? I've done that. I was reading a little bit about it. Did you guys eat 12 pounds of potatoes? No, that's real rural food here. It looks like from the definition, from what I saw on the web, there was some sushi, there was some other things like that. No, potatoes, more potatoes. There's some dirt for dipping. Yeah, that's dirt. There's this dirt you can eat out there. You dip that in there. And I tend not to drink beer in the morning, but that's what you have to do when you're here. Beer is a very important part of the culture. So it's about 10 in the morning. You've eaten about maybe 15 to 16 pounds of potatoes and dirt, and then they break out the beer. And, and it's not even good beer. It's paseña. And this is the advertisement for it. Paseña es cerveza. Paseña, it's beer. That's all. I mean, it's pretty bad when you have to clarify on the label that it actually is beer. And they don't want to make any more claims to it. Is it good beer? Is it bad? No, it's just beer. So there I am. That's a very good diet for a Year of Peru. Have that in your cafeteria. 12 pounds of potatoes and 3 liters of bad beer to really understand what it's like down there. Every head of state comes by. Here I am showing Hillary Clinton around when she was the First Lady. There she is with her entourage of people. So the result for archaeologists is a disaster. This is what Tiwanaku looked like before Ponce de Sanguinés got a hold of it. And that's what it looks like afterwards. And then there was all these things he didn't understand, like all these rocks and all these walls and then those big stones, but they were covered up, and you need a monument. You need to build something, and he had a shortage of stone, so he had that all taken out and put up into the wall because he wanted to create something larger, more monumental. So essentially, it's completely recreated. So part of my work when it's down there, when I'm not fighting with the Atlantis people or drinking beer at 10 in the morning, I actually have to go out and do research while I'm there. And part of it, what I call, is forensic archaeology. And that's simply me trying to figure out who did what prior to me being there. And just trying to figure out who excavated here, who saw this, when were these stone moves. And finally, after talking to Ponce Sanguines for about 1,000 hours, it seems, I finally got a hold of those notes. And I was able to slowly go through them. Here's some of his drawings. And from here, I was able to see, here's the process of excavation and restoration. And from here, I can tell there used to be a wall here, there used to be stairs. This building had 17 different stairways going into it. Absolutely magnificent. But if you're going to have a monumental palace, you should only have one entrance, right? So he took all the other entrances out and just kept one. So it's completely created. And for an archaeologist, this is a complete disaster. So I'm trying to recreate what Tiwanaku looked like after this sort of bout of nationalism sort of completely affected the site. And here I am actually with one of the original excavators from the 50s. His name is Marcelino. He often forgets what happened that day, that week, or the fact that I am actually employing him and he should show up to work. But he remembers everything crystal clear from about 50 years ago. So he tells me, no, we found a stone here, we found this here, then there's a stairways here. So I go around with him and actually doing all these interviews to figure out what was located where. A little bit earlier than that, one of the bad things that happened for Tiwanaku was the construction of the railway. And as it went by going towards Lake Titicaca and over towards Peru, they thought the ruins would be a great source of stone to create the railways. So they looted out the stone, but we do have photographs of what it looked like before that happened. This is not Max Uli. This is 1893. And I was able to chart out the location of every one of the 105 pictures taken at Tiwanaku. And from there, I was able to take the picture from the same location to see, well, how much has it changed? In some cases, certain things have remained in place with very little modification. This is the Temple of Pumapunko. In this case, we lost a stone and gained a donkey. Here are those pillars from the Kala Sasaya, and you can see how they were just pretty much just the whole thing recreated. And that one's gone completely. Let me go back to that one. That's a huge stone, and I can't find it. And you know, sometimes when you excavate things, go through the screen, you miss a few things here or potsherd, but I'm pretty sure I did not miss this gigantic stone. But looks like that was blown up during the railway construction. So that one's gone. What I can do with that is see, well, what part of this site is authentic and what isn't. Sort of like the situation in Cusco. When you arrive, you're like, what is Inca, what isn't? You know, what is being created here? At least I can sit down and go, well, if that stone in the picture is there on the bottom, it's still in its location up on top. So I start recreating. That hasn't moved. That's been destroyed. That's been recreated. So I'm virtually recreating the site. This stone right here, and this is something that happens, and this is sort of the mind of the archaeologist. You end up looking at these stones for such a long time, it's almost like a puzzle. And you know, like, wait, that piece goes there. How do you know that? This stone has been missing for 100 years, and I walked by a pile of stones, and I saw one, and I go, that's it. It's on its face. I go, flip it over, there's going to be engravings right there. They flipped it over, they go, how'd you know that? I go, I don't know. I've been looking at these pictures so long, I knew the form. We were able to pick it up and drop it into the museum. You can see a lot of it has been completely lost. Now, once I've done all that, I can actually start doing what people think archaeologists do, which is excavate. But remember, this is a national monument. Every time you move something, people get mad. If you dig, people are wondering, why are you digging? And there's always accusations that I'm stealing gold. Always finding gold and stealing it. You're bringing all this equipment and all this stuff. You're so wealthy. So I'm so wealthy. Why I've been wearing these same jeans since '98. You guys have seen me here all the time. I am not wealthy. I take the same bus as you guys. This is just to start off and minimize how much excavation we have to do. This is a radar. So from here, it's extremely boring. You just sort of drag this box back and forth across the site. Another one of these pieces of equipment for geophysics. and you create one of these maps. For somebody for geophysics, they're thrilled. They're like, oh wow, you can see all these structures. I really can't see much. They're like, down there, there's something really cool. That's when I can actually get to the excavation. Now I'm working in an Aymara community. In this valley, there are, I think, only like 4 last names and 2 first names. It's worse than growing up in Jersey, where I did, where everyone was named either Peter, Paul, Paulie, and Petey. That seemed like the only names in my high school. Over here, same thing. Only a couple of last names, a couple of first names. I go in there for the site. I go, this is my dig. I'm going to take charge. I'm going to organize things. Within a week, I'd made a mess of everything. And they told me, no, let us take charge of this. They know how to divide up work among 26 different communities over several thousand people. Like, so-and-so will work because that's the cousin of so-and-so. Then we'll have that person work for 2 days because he just lost his mother-in-law, and bum, bum, bum. So they divide up the work between them quite well. I realized you got to back off and leave other people do their own thing, especially when I do it so poorly. That's me. And when I actually want to excavate, I tell this guy over here. He then talks to the other guys in Aymara. They don't want me to actually learn Aymara. They want to be able to talk and know that I can't understand them. So I say, Cesar, have them dig over here. He's like, sure. He goes and talks to them for 20 minutes, and they laugh a lot. And he comes back, and they say, yeah, they will. It's like, what did you say for 20 minutes? And he kept saying over and over this word, baka, 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 like that. And it's like, and finally I asked somebody, what's baka? And they go, oh, that's a raptor bird. It sort of floats over the site, it'll tear down and just rip a guinea pig apart. And I go, okay, good. Why were you talking about that? I go, that's your nickname. I go, that's my nickname? I thought it was so nice. This mountain bike scared them because I would just sort of come around the corner. They'd have to pretend to be working. So they're like, Baka's coming, Baka's coming. So when the little kid would go charging across the site, everyone would get back to work. So here it is. Here's the excavations. A little bit further down, the women work extremely well. Whatever you do when you go visit Peru and Bolivia, do what you want. Never knock one of these hats off one of these women. That will be the end of your trip. Pretty much so. These are extremely strong people, and the women, I think, are the economic workhorse of the entire region. So that was a little area that they saw below. They said, go excavate here. I just wanted to show this, that indeed you can find things using a radar equipment. And the coolest thing I found was this was actually a little ceremonial pool, and there was the plug that was still left in there. So there's a little drain that goes out, there's the plug, and news of this came out, and all these local leaders and politicians would come by, and I'd have to bring them over here, and I'd show them the plug, and I'd pull out the plug, and then I'd pull it back in, and everyone's like, great, good stuff, keep working. That was the effects of one of my excavations. When we do get excavating in a more serious way, we record everything. Often we can't move much, so we're sort of cleaning out old looter's hole, trying not to move too much. Remember, I'm an American excavating on a national site in another country. I'm always under pressure from people looking who don't want something like this, and it's understandable. Here's one of the temples. I can go through this. Pretty much everything was destroyed, but finding the little remains that the Spanish left when they were taking the stones out, we can recreate what the form of the temple looked like along the exterior and along the interior also. Everything that we excavated, every stone that we had, we ended up mapping it out to create the form. To create here, I go, okay, this is what a temple looks like. And the cool thing about this was this became the basis, sort of the dialogue point, and using this model for a graphic for National Geographic. So we spent about a year trying to organize this stuff, coming up with different ideas of how to present this. Here's another shot. Here's close to the final. Then here was the representation I thought of what Tiwanaku would have looked like. And I thought, I'm going to try to make something that lasts a bit of time, because every time there's a National Geographic painting, you're like, that's dated, that's influenced by this, and so on. I go, this is done with the most recent data. I think it's right. When it came out, I looked at it, I go, good Lord, this looks like Homeland Security. Like you're taking like a little route in through the airport to get into the actual temple area. People are going to look at this later on and go, this is the result of the paranoid mind of the North American after the 9/11 attacks or something. So all these things eventually will be criticized. Here's one of my students using a laser transit. And from here, we do something called archaeoastronomy. And this is to understand how these temples were aligned to the stars, the moons, and so on. And this is standing in the Kala Sasaya, the same location where the sun didn't come up through there. That's the view that way. And yeah, indeed, the solstice, the equinox, the summer solstice, they do actually do align with the temple. Why is the equinox not celebrated? Look at that date. It's way off tourist season. Tourist season is in the summertime. If you have a celebration during that time, no one is going to come up here. So what's being celebrated as authentically Andean as part of the Aymara culture also corresponds with global tourist trends. We actually put a nail in the ground. We said, this is where we're going to take all our measurements. We came back the next day, and there was a tour guide standing there going, this nail represents the power spot of the Kala Society. It took one day for that to become incorporated into like local tourist lore. So she took her shoes off, rubbed her foot on it, and eventually then we put the little theodolite thing back on. Looking at the other side, where those big pillars were, this is part of a large calendar where your solstice, equinox could be measured, 30 days to solstice and equinox, zenith and anti-zenith, a concept I don't have time to get into, but it's a very complex calendar which is self-correcting every year. Clearly they had a lot of knowledge when it comes to calendrics. And the winter solstice, after that ceremony when all the people left, that's the shot where the actual beam of light crosses. And this is my attempt at creating graphics. It crosses over the templete, goes over to this other building. But right over here is where it landed on something that we decided to excavate. And always, and I took a picture, and what is it, Terry? When you're excavating, you always find the nicest thing the last day. And this was found, I say, this part, and then realized we had an entire burial pit of people. And this was found 1 hour before the end of the excavation. So we said, we got to cover this up. And we invited John Verano, who will be speaking next week, to actually come down here and excavate it. And here he is standing. Here's the students going through it, some of the bodies. And he slowly sort of pulled everything apart to find all the different bodies with a yama underneath. And from here, he's able to determine that indeed there was a lot of trauma to the skull. Here are the holes that were made. Here's a young adult male who was probably very, very strong, he said. He had a couple of holes in his skull. Teeth knocked out, so perhaps it was during a battle. And here's an 8-year-old child's skull with all these little holes popped in there. Entry, exit. And we actually found the weapon that it was used to actually pop all these little holes in the skull and actually fit in there quite well, including this shot right there, which looks a little bit painful, I believe. But along with this were some of the nicest ceramics I've ever seen in my life. And I'm only showing you this because everybody keeps asking me, what's the nicest, coolest thing you found? Well, here it is. Now, don't ask me this question again. These were very, very nice ceramics, including this little guy over here, which they said was some sort of little lobster creature that would come out of the ground when the rains would start. So clearly this is somehow related to the start of the agricultural cycle. And this is probably the most important Andean invention when it comes to the development of civilization. And this is the single-serving beer glass. And this is something that we found a lot of. Here's a shot of another one. And just in case you're a little bit curious how we know they were drinking beer, here's a guy drinking a very large beer. The one thing that we find during that time of that sacrifice in that whole area is a lot of beer glasses. Now, we talked about Tiwanaku, or Ponce Sanguines talked about this empire and so on, these armies. It looks like they were manufacturing a great deal of beer. This glass right here, what is interesting about this if somebody gave this to you at a party? What would you do with it? You put it on your head. You can't put it down. That is worse than duct taping 40s to your hands and saying you can't let these go. This is giving you a glass and saying you cannot put this down. You need to continue to drink this. Oh, and it looks like the rest of it. Here is another way. Now you're drinking beer. This is a hallucinogenic enema tube. So just in case the beer isn't working fast enough, you can actually go and take some of this. Oh, it looks like the other part has gone away. This image cannot be. This image cannot be. So, as I go from here, ooh, excuse me. And slideshow from current slide. There we go. As I take this up to the actual present from the excavations at Tiwanaku, what can this actually say about the present situation in Bolivia, in Peru, the place of archaeology and archaeologists in these countries? This is what happened at Tiwanaku slightly after I left, after one season. And Evo Morales was the first indigenous president elected, and they had the inauguration actually at the ruins of Tiwanaku. Now, everyone's standing on my old excavations, but fortunately nothing was damaged. Here they are on top of the Kala Sasaya. Now, the recreation of this was as best as they could do it. Here's Evo Morales standing with a 90-year-old woman. I don't know why, but he decided to bring her out. And here's his description of what he's wearing. This is clearly being used for political uses. He's saying the symbology of the poncho, it contains elements of condors and of snakes, talking about the highlands, talking about the lowlands. The stick has elements from each province of Bolivia. His hat represents the four corners of the country. This is the same thing that was going on in the past when the leaders at Tiwanaku were bringing in people, giving them beer, giving them hallucinogens, showing them these amazing effects with the light, showing the calendrics, how the shadows play, and doing these human sacrifice and so on. They're doing a lot of performance. It's symbolic, but it is powerful. It's politics. And in the same way, Evo Morales used the same thing that the Inca did. When they arrived at Tiwanaku, they saw something that was important, and they interpreted it to fit their own needs. This is where we came from. The Inca is descendant from here. With Evo Morales, the same thing. There's the staff god on one side. There's Evo Morales holding on to the staffs, dressed almost identically. So what's going on here is that the past is being reused for the present. So when you go to Bolivia and Peru, they say, oh, the past is everywhere. The past is everywhere, anywhere you go. You go to Europe, you'll see castles and so on. One thing that you don't see anywhere else that you see of much more here is the past being actively used for present reasons, from politics to marketing to global tourism to an attempt to keep a country from falling apart into civil war. And that's the interesting part about this. Now, when it comes to what happened at Tiwanaku, what happened with the Inca, what happened with the conquest, there is also that element that as people interested in archaeology and anthropology, you should stay and realize that Peru continued to exist after the conquest. People continued to live there. And one day when we're just sitting on the Acapana Pyramid, right on the center steps, we're watching the sunset. Actually, one day after solstice, so things are still much there. The sun is in the same position as for the winter solstice. And we can see, oh, damn it, the sun actually goes down and goes down further to the point that it actually is completely framed by the church steeple that was built in the 16th century. It was simply too much of a coincidence. I thought, when the Spanish told the Aymara they had to build a church, that they'd build it perfectly aligned along the solstice marker with their old temple in a way of keeping their religion alive on some level. And that's was one of those just amazing moments of, oh, wow, I don't think anyone else has seen that in a while. But anyway, that'll be the end of my talk, and thank you very much. I'll be around for questions.